Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to show you how to fully disassemble and how to fully rebuild from scratch an F9Q 1.9dci engine. These are very popular engines and they're found in a lot of vans and cars, Vauxhall Vivaro, Nissan Primastar and Renault Trafic, and a lot of the Renault models like Megane, Laguna, Scenic, and you can probably name a few more models that use this 1.9dci engine. Now this is going to be the exact procedure for this particular F9Q 760, and I would say you're probably going to be able to apply 99.9% in all the F9Q engines. There's different variants of the F9Q. Some of them have slightly different cylinder head with less compression, more compression. But as I said, you can apply the same technique. You're also probably going to be able to apply this to the 1.5dci engine. They're fairly simple engines, 4-cylinder, 8 valves, 1 camshaft, nothing complicated. So if you're looking to start learning fixing your own car and your own van and rebuilding your own engine, this is probably a very good starting point to start and learn on something like this. I have a full gasket kit made by Elring. I have actually 3 or 4 different kits which I put together so I can get all the seals. We're going to talk about this later on when we proceed with the video, with the rebuild video. But before we start, the whole process is something essential. We're going to have to check the clearances on the crankshaft, which I'm going to show you all this in detail. We're going to use plastic gauge, so if you haven't seen this, you're probably going to enjoy this bit of diagnosis and measuring. So yeah, as I like to say, let's not waste any time, let's get started. I'm going to show you how to remove this catalytic converter. This is obviously on the hot side of the turbo. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts here. I'm going to spray some WD-40 on them, some penetrating fluid just to loosen them up a little bit. Might need to heat them up if they're very difficult to remove. And you've got this bracket. As I said, the other one is missing here. I have ordered it already, so whenever it arrives during the installation I will show you what it looks like, but for now we're just gonna go ahead with the removal. In the next step, I'm going to show you how to remove the oil feed line, the turbocharger, and then we're going to proceed with the removal of the intake manifold and the exhaust manifold. There are 3 bolts that hold the turbo to the exhaust manifold. This is one of them. You can see I sprayed some penetrating fluid. Second one here. I'm gonna show you the third one. Now let's proceed with the removal of the manifold bolts and nuts. This is gonna need some cleaning, but definitely not the worst I've seen. This engine has over 165,000 miles. Now let's pull the exhaust manifold out. So I'm not surprised, this is nice and clean. The next step I'm gonna proceed is to clean the intake ports, and we've got number, if we start counting from here, we've got number 1, 2 and 4 closed, and then number 3 is open. So you can see by looking at the valves, you can see whether the valve is down or up, and the best way I find when I see them physically that they're closed, I just always double check and test them with a bit of brake cleaner. So just spray a little bit and you'll see obviously the liquid holds in place, and if your valves are obviously not bent and in good shape, you shouldn't have any liquid losing through the valve. So again, you just want to test it a little bit. You don't want to go too mad in case your valves are leaking, just because you don't want all that carbon and dirt and oil leaking inside the cylinders. But yeah, this looks quite good. We're going to clean the intake manifold as well, in the same way with Mr. Muscle oven cleaner and some brake cleaner as well. We're just going to loosen up the residue here. I'm going to get a brush, give it a good clean with a brush, and then we're going to extract this with my vacuum extractor. Hopefully you'll be able to see a bit more now. So that's the cylinder, and this is after the gross clean. So we're gonna apply some Mr. Muscle oven cleaner, agitate it, leave it overnight, and then I'm gonna extract it and clean it tomorrow. That's the dirty cylinder, which needs closed and clean. Now it's very important not to leave the water lying around, so what I normally do is after I clean up the bulk of the foam from the oven cleaner with the water, then I use brake cleaner and I rinse everything thoroughly, and then we're gonna extract this again with the wet vacuum cleaner. So repeat this process everywhere. Rinse the block as well, so there's no water lying around, and then get everything blown with an air line, and then you repeat the process again if it's needed. Let's go ahead and remove this EGR valve from the intake manifold so we can give the manifold a good clean. This is 8mm bolt, and then you've got 5mm Allen key here. As you can see clearly, this is in urgent need of cleaning, so I'm gonna do the same process as the intake ports or the valve ports. I'm gonna spray some Mr. Muscle oven cleaner very well. I'm gonna fill it up as much as I can. I'm gonna seal it with a bag, let it eat it overnight, and then power wash it. Do the same thing again, probably twice, until we get this intake manifold in good clean condition. This is after the first stage of cleaning. By the way, excuse my voice, I'm a little bit sick, but I'm still working away at the project here because the time is ticking. So I washed it through here, and every single one of these holes, and you can see where the chemical was. It's eaten the deposits here. So we're gonna apply second stage of cleaning. So we're going to spray more Mr. Muscle oven cleaner in these ports. We're going to let it sit for maybe another day,
because I have plenty of time, plenty of other things to get on with, like for example rebuilding the gearbox. And yeah, we're gonna let this sit, and then hopefully we'll have something like this across the whole intake manifold. So you can see what we're talking about here. So very clean. Now I'm gonna treat this intake manifold with XCP treatment. We see the bottle in a minute. So this is the product I was telling you about. So this is XCP rust blocker clear coat. You can use it on any really metal, to be honest with you, as long as it doesn't get super hot. Again, this intake manifold doesn't get that hot.
I'm going to use some special cast iron or metal rust converter to treat this block as it's starting to rust, and I want to preserve it, keep it in good condition. Gonna start by draining the oil, and by the way, this oil is less than 1,000 miles, but we've got to change it anyway. I'm going to remove these 8mm bolts from here. You need 17mm socket and go clockwise. You need a 13mm socket for this pulley here. These are 13mm bolts. There's one at the back. In order to remove the AC compressor on a 1.9dci engine, this is Trafic Vivaro and Primastar, you've got three 13mm bolts. And that's compressor off. We've got several 16mm bolts. I need to remove this bracket here because it's obstructing, and this is 13mm bolt. In order to remove this pipe here, we've got T50 Torx. This was very tight. 10mm bolts here on this plastic flange. $10mm bolts here, one on each side. In the next step, I'm going to remove the coolant heater and the thermostat. You've got a 10mm nut here. So I'm going to replace this washer back in place and this self-locking nut. We've got three 10mm bolts here. Let me bring you closer. Now let's remove the vacuum pump. You've got T40 Torx bolts. This port is the last one that I haven't cleaned. This valve is now closing. Okay, so this valve is now closed. I've removed the pulley, so I'm ready to show you the mark. And hopefully you can see this. This line here has to match between this rib and this rib here. Okay, in order to remove the timing belt, you want to loosen this bolt here. This is a super simple system, and the previous time when I replaced the timing belt, I put some thread locker on this bolt just to stop it from coming off, just in case that happened. The timing procedure uses some extremely rare tools which most of you are not gonna have, including myself. I have some of them but not all of them. There's a special machine for checking basically the tone of the belt. When you just pull it, also you twist it, and if it's between 45 and 90 degrees, then that's where you want to be. You have a tool for pre-tensioning the belt before you tighten the bolt. So yeah, I'm gonna show you the really basic and simple procedure without over complicating everything. The next thing you want to do is you want to loosen this nut here, which is tightened to 50 Newton meters. So once I loosen that, that will remove the tension, and then we can take the timing belt off. I'm going to use an impact with a 16mm socket. We need to remove this plate here. These two bolts are 8mm. Next is the water pump. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts all together. Some of them are longer and some of them are shorter. So you just want to remember the location of the short and the long bolts. So you've got the two short bolts here, and then the other three are the longer ones. So that's where I'm gonna place my screwdriver. Hopefully you saw this, and just open it up. You've got three 13mm bolts, which are extremely tight. Okay, don't be tempted to use impact on these bolts. You're working with aluminium and it's very easy to cross them. You've got two more bolts here. That's the first one of the two. This one is much easier to remove, and this is the second one. Okay, once you have this out, you can replace this. We're also going to install a plug on this pipe here because we don't want any contamination to get in. I like to use some of these silicone plugs. They're easy to clean and stretch really well on this sort of applications. Now the next thing is to get a spanner and loosen this nut. Now this can be difficult, so we're just going to have to take care not to break anything. I have ordered new pipes because these are so badly rusted. I don't want these back on this vehicle. So if they snap, it's not the end of the world, but we will try and remove them without snapping them. Grab a 17mm spanner. Now go back and forth a few times, and I'm going to also spray penetrating fluid. Now I'm going to remove these. I want to show you how to remove the fuel rail pipes to the injectors and the fuel rail pipe to the high pressure pump. These are super rusty, as you can see, so you've got to be very careful. So I want to go easy. It's very important to place plugs on these ports here. Now, in order to remove the rail, you want to squeeze on this tab here, get the fuel line out. I'm going to insert a cap here and just loosen these 13mm bolts. You've got two of them, so just take these out. And that's how you remove a fuel rail on a F9Q engine. you want to remove this camshaft sprocket here, you can use the locking tool, or you can just use an impact. I've marked the position of the camshaft wheel to this panel here, so I know where to put it and how to reverse it. This is 18mm socket. I'm going to remove this wheel now from here, so I don't want it to basically fall and smash on the floor. So what I will do is I'm just gonna put a cable tie on it to retain it. It's keyed, so there's no way you will put it the wrong way, as you can see here. Let's remove these 3 8mm bolts. So this is the location of the camshaft sensor. It's held in place by one 8mm bolt. I'm going to remove this bolt now. And that's how easy it is to remove camshaft sensor on F9Q engine. Time to remove these 17mm nuts on the injectors. I'm going to install a rubber cap on the injector just to keep the dirt away. And let's move on to the next one. In order to remove the return line on the injectors, you want to take this clamp out. You can take it out completely and then replace it when you're finished. Well done Bosch and Renault for designing these beautiful connectors here. This is probably the easiest design that I've used compared to BMW, Mercedes and other brands. So well done. Now I'm going to remove the bolts and the clamps that hold the injectors in place. These are normally tightened to 25 Newton meters from the factory, so I'm not expecting a massive fight here, but we'll see whether it will be easy or not. Oh! Everything seems to be very stiff because of the rust on these injectors, so I'm expecting I'm going to have a bit of a fight with them. This one is loose, this one is loose, and it's always the first and the last that put up a fight. So I'm gonna apply a bit of heat and then I'm gonna extract them. So this one is number 2, came out easy enough. Number 3 is the same, no fight. I pre-stoked this in WD-40, so I'm hoping maybe it will move a little bit, but I'm not super optimistic. I'm probably going to have one of these. I'm probably going to get one of these hydraulic tools and see if I can maybe put some proper torque on this to lift it up. But at this point I'm just working with basically what I have, and it's a pretty heavy duty sliding hammer, but it's really not doing much. I tried several ways to remove these two injectors. This is number 1 and 4. It's so badly stuck, it feels like it's actually welded to the aluminium block, even though they're two different types of metals. So I had to manufacture this tool. So this is my old sliding hammer, and this is probably around 14mm thick stainless steel. So I had to cut and make this. Basically looks like a foot, and it basically engages with the injector here. So I'm hoping that this is going to allow me to remove them. Now I've got the comfort of working on an engine stand, so what I'm planning to do is slightly rotate the engine. This is so bad. I've never seen anything like it. Before I started using the pneumatic tool, I knew this was either I'm going to take it off, I'm going to destroy it, and in order to properly install the pneumatic tool you have to remove this bit of the injector and then install the cap directly onto the injector. Now what I try to do here is to loosen it up, but obviously it didn't work. So after you take this off, it's very difficult, almost impossible, unless you're a professional, to adjust the injector. So I'm gonna have to take this nut from here and then screw the tool directly onto it. This is 30mm spanner, so we'll see now if this is gonna put up a battle. If not, hopefully this is gonna come out easier, and if this doesn't come out again, I'm gonna apply a bit more heat. I'm also gonna steep it with some thinners and some ATF overnight. I'm gonna try the same tomorrow. If this doesn't work, then it means I'm gonna have to take the head off and bring it to a machinist to drill it out. So really not many options, but we'll try our best. You can see this was damaged by the tool going up and down, because it's quite a bit of room here to slide, and unfortunately that's the consequences, but it's not the end of the world. These injectors are not super expensive, and as part of the restoration nothing has gone wrong so far. These things happen, unfortunately, so it's just one of these things. Right, we're back to the removal procedure, and this time I'm going to use an air hammer, and I'm going to apply some impacts whilst this injector removal tool is hammering up and down and it's trying to remove the injector. So hopefully this will work. I did pre-soak it with thinners, paint thinners, for about a couple of hours. Now I will do it overnight, but just as I'm trying to do this during the day now, I may as well keep trying all the different tools that I have here in the garage. So this one has this type of attachment here at the end, so it will hug kind of the injector. I'm going to try and apply the impacts and the vibrations here at the very bottom. So hopefully I have enough power in this air compressor to power the two at the same time, but I'm planning to kind of reduce the impacts on the injector from the gun, and hopefully this will do the majority of the work. So yeah, I'm gonna put this camera on the stand now and let's give it a shot. In order to remove the baffle, you want to take out this 13mm bolt. These are 13mm head bolts on the oil pump. I'm gonna check all the bearing caps, and I'm gonna check their bearings just to see for wear, see how worn they are. And this is basically number 1, 2, 3 and 4, so the number 1 is beside the flywheel, and you can see the caps on the main bearings, they're numbered. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 right here at the end on the timing end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the one that is currently facing on the top here, just because it's easier. And you can see number 1 is at top dead center, number 4 is almost there as well. So you've got 11mm socket here, and this is very, very tight. Just before I remove the cap, I'm gonna give it a good clean with brake cleaner. I'm gonna mark it, just so I don't mix them up later on. This is cap on cylinder number 3. These are the 2 bolts. These are M9 bolts, and I believe the length is 42mm, but we're gonna check this with a caliper anyway. I don't think we're doing too badly here. This van has 165,000 miles. This is very, very rough. I believe this bearing was running with no oil for a while, so absolutely great job we're doing this right now. It's actually pitted, hopefully you can see this, and it's very, very rough when you touch it, so not great at all. Now let's remove the last 4 bolts on cylinder 1 and 4. This one is not as rough as number 2 here. I've also marked it as well, just so I know what way to put it in place. And number 1 is not bad as well. So I'm gonna wash this side and mark it with 1 as well. Okay, let's go ahead and remove these main bearing caps. I'm gonna start from this side here, from number 1. These are E14. I'm gonna start with number 5, and you just have to wiggle it really, really well. There's some scoring marks on this bearing, and I can feel it on my finger, so that's not great. The crankshaft looks good, so there's no damage to the crankshaft, but there's some scoring to cap bearing number 5. Number 4 looks a bit better. Number 3 is very bad. Something's definitely scored this bearing here. I'm not really sure what it is, but you can feel it on your finger, so I'm really glad we're doing this now. You can hear it, it's catching on my fingernail. And this one is very bad as well. I'm so glad this hasn't ruined the crankshaft. Very deep groove here. Thank God the crankshaft is in good condition. This is number 2. Okay, in the next step what I'm going to show you is how to use plastic gauge, and we're going to use this. This is the crankshaft bearing number 3. This is the main bearing, these are the rod bearings. So we want to check basically the tolerance between the crankshaft and the bearing itself. So I'm going to put the figures, the tolerance on the screen so you can see it, and I'm taking all these values from the Renault repair manual. This is the factory repair manual, not any of the aftermarket ones. So you're getting the exact figure. So what I'm going to apply is pre-clean these with brake cleaner, and I'm going to apply the plastic gauge here in the middle, and I'm going to place the clean cap, so no oil on the cap shell bearing. I'm going to insert it, the bolts, and I'm going to tie it to the correct torque spec, which is 20 Newton meters plus 62 degrees plus minus 4. So I'm actually going to go for the lower figure. So I'm going to apply 20 Newton meters plus about 58 degrees. So this is a brand new pack of plastic gauge. We're going to use one of these strips, cut them and apply them there in place, just like that, right there in the middle. So this is the strip, so I'm just going to measure the right length. I'm going to apply it here, and then I'm going to apply the correct pressure. So this cap has been cleaned, so it's nice and dry. Install this in the center. Now install the bolts. Okay, in the next step we're going to apply 20 Newton meters first and then 58 degrees. That's 20 Newton meters. Now let's go for 58 degrees. So torque to spec. In the next step we're going to loosen these again and check the crushed plastic with the scale that we have in the kit. Hope you can see this plastic gauge here. Let's check the results of the plastic gauge compression test. So this one here is a little bit narrower than 0.050, and we're getting closer to 0.063, so I would say we're somewhere around 0.058, so we're between this and this. Now let's peel this plastic off very gently. This bearing is in decent condition compared to the rest of them, and you can just see the amount of silicone that has been applied. We're going to do the same. It takes about 45 milliliters of silicone to fill these holes. And now let's remove the crankshaft. Let's go ahead and remove this thrust bearing. Very carefully, not to scratch the cylinder walls. This is the other one. So we've got one on this side and one on this side. So these are 11mm bolts. So we need to remove these first in order to take this apart and lift this top cover off the head. Okay. Just because of the restriction with all the metal bits here, you can only probably cut about 60-65% of this injector without causing any damage to the head itself. So that's why I was hitting and banging in order to just kind of weaken it and break it. So eventually it snapped. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna weld a bolt or a nut. I'll see what I have. And then we're gonna basically weld this to the injector. Otherwise this injector is square here. You can see the profile. It's square and it won't rotate because of the head. So now we're gonna be able to rotate this. And we're gonna try and break it. And then we're gonna do the same with this one. Then we'll remove the head off. And after that we're gonna try and beat it from the inside out. The reason I'm using this piece of stainless steel I don't want to hit the soft metal surfaces here, so I'm just basically putting it on top of the aluminium edge and just sliding it. So this, you can see the amount of hits and scratches. So if it wasn't that, I would have ruined the head. I'm going to remove the head of this engine, and this is the pattern we're going to work. So we're going to start from 10, 9, 8, 7 and work our way to number 1. So this is the procedure for tightening the head bolts. We're going to go in reverse. The repair manual explains the process for the removal of these oil squirters or piston coolers. So you've got a 7mm drill bit and you drill it until you get to the ball bearing, and then basically you stop because you don't want to contaminate the oil passage, and after that you insert a special tool and you pull it out. I've clamped on vice grips. I'm going to try and use the puller that I made for the injectors and see if this works. Nice one. We didn't have to drill anything. I'm gonna take out the pistons to wash them, but before I take them out, I'm going to wrap the con rods here so they don't scratch the cylinder when I'm taking them out. I'm gonna show you how we're gonna clean these surfaces here. I'm gonna use some standard thinners. So I'm gonna pour in here and agitate it with a soft brush. I'm gonna take out the pistons now. I've cleaned up the block. It's pretty much squeaky clean. So just before I leave it, obviously it's going to be open, so I'm going to spray some fogging oil just to lubricate the cylinders, and then I'm going to go with a cloth and then just rub it in. Just because I don't want these surfaces to rust. After we cut the injectors and then we snap them with the impact, the reason I removed the head so I can beat them out through the back, and as you can see I've already done this one slightly, so you just want to hit it and it will fall off. So this is the tip of the injector, which is what just dropped there. We're gonna do the same on this side as well. I've got a small, this is E5 socket, just so I can place it on the top of the tip. Now don't get mixed up with the glow plugs, that's not what you want to hit. And this one is going in nicely as well. Okay, one more tip as well. I'm probably gonna weld on the other side and then create surface where I can just hammer on, so hopefully that will work. So basically the injector has come out halfway, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna weld on one side and then I'm gonna weld on the other side, so this will hopefully heat up and then shrink the metal. Wish me luck. I'll report very shortly after the welding. This here is 27mm nut. As we've got a gasket here that we're going to be replacing. I'm going to show you how to install this piston squirter or piston oil cooler. And you can see these are angled at different angles for 1 and 3 and 2 and 4. So this is number 1, number 2, 3 and 4. We want to basically have the same angle as here on number 1. You can only get this from Renault as far as I'm aware. So this is 893. So this is from basically for 1 and 3. If you want 2 and 4, the part number is going to be 892. Now let's unseal this part. And I've marked it previously when I removed the part. So what I'm going to do is, it has to be at 3 degrees, but we're not going to faff about here with an angle gauge here. It's quite tight for space, so I'm just going to mark basically at the pipe, at the squirter. And we're going to match the original marks in here. I'm going to give it a light tap just to drive it in. I'm using aluminium insert on this shaft. Double check the angle. Everything seems to be pretty good. So there you go. Super easy job. In the next step, I'm going to proceed with removal of the piston rings from all 4 pistons. I've got a new set of Kolbenschmidt piston rings, and I'm going to show you the difference between the old ones and the new ones in the cylinder. Before we get to the installation, I need to remove them, and I need to clean the pistons first as well, because you're going to have some carbon and oil in the grooves, and that's what wears the piston rings. They expand, it builds up underneath them, and then you get some wear over time. Now, the wear is minimal, but we're doing this whole rebuild now, so you may as well do it right. So I'm going to use probably these 2 tools. I'll just use whatever's handier. And in order to remove the top one, we'll start with the top piston ring. And it kind of looks like you're using it upside down, but that's the correct way to use this tool. Okay, that's one out. Second piston ring out. The scraper ring, they're much easier to remove. And you want to pull this little wire out. Okay. I'm going to bring you up closer and show you on the camera what we're going to be cleaning. So you've got a lot of carbon here on the edges. You've got some carbon inside these grooves, and not so much on the top, but we want to clean these grooves because that pushes the piston rings towards the cylinder walls, and that causes probably most of the wear. Just before we proceed with the full cleaning procedure, what I like to do is I like to apply a little bit of masking tape on these sensitive parts here. If you're using strong chemicals, sometimes this will take it off, and I don't want to lose this coating. I'm going to be using Mr. Muscle Oven Cleaner as usual. It is a strong chemical, so wear a mask. I'm going to place it in the tray. Obviously I've covered this coating here so I don't get any chemical on it. I'm just going to spray into the grooves here. hoping you can see past the foam, but these pistons are basically shiny like new. So keep rubbing the chemical. This is the Mr. Muscle oven cleaner, and then leave it for another while. So you can see this is super clean. The foam is nice and white. When I start rubbing, it's going to become black, so that means it's obviously working and it's removing all the residue from oil and carbon. So the more you rub, the better. And if you feel like going and doing this over 2 stages or 3 stages, depending on how bad your pistons are, you can go ahead and do that. I think in my case, after I rinse this, to be honest with you, don't be wasting any chemicals when rinsing. You can just get a bucket of warm water and that will be sufficient to just rinse. Obviously spray the wrist pin here with WD-40 to just remove any moisture. You don't want the steel part rusting, but you can see how much oil and carbon this chemical is removing. It's very, very strong stuff, this Mr. Muscle oven cleaner. So this is going to get nice and deep through the grooves, and it's going to clean all surfaces. It will be nearly as good as new. I'm going to start with piston number 1. I'm going to rinse the brush and dip the piston. Try not to get water in it if you can, but if you do get some water inside, it's not the end of the world. I'm just going to use WD-40 and brake cleaner anyway. This is no more than 15 minutes, guys, so if you do this twice, you can imagine the results. So this piston is, in my opinion, as good as new. So just look at these channels here. I see some carbon buildups on number 1 here, because obviously piston ring number 1 is the hottest, and there's quite a lot more carbon that sticks there. That's why it's the thicker one of the two compression piston rings. And yeah, I think the results are fantastic. It speaks for itself. You can see the arrow that should point normally towards the flywheel in these vehicles. Amazing results for 15 minutes with Mr. Muscle oven cleaner. I can highly recommend this to everyone, and I see a lot of people using some very expensive chemicals or some special chemicals for pistons and stuff like that. Really go with a 3-pound spray from your local store, and the results will be absolutely fascinating. So we'll move on to the next piston. I'm applying WD-40 just to lubricate the piston pin or the wrist pin, and I'm gonna just move it so it goes everywhere. I don't want any water from the rinsing process getting into this wrist pin and rusting it. And the same process with the rest of these. So this is an oil pump for Renault Trafic Vauxhall Vivaro and Nissan Primastar, and there's a couple of different variants. You've got the one for the vans which has 20 teeth, and the one for the Laguna has 24 teeth. So you can see this is a solid sprocket. This is a solid sprocket. Some of the Laguna versions and the other Renault models, they may have the same part number, like this one here, and these part numbers for this part here, so they might be the same, but the only difference may be in the sprocket itself. Now what we're going to do today is we're going to take this apart. I'm suspecting that this is faulty because there's some damage to the teeth which you won't be able to see from this camera angle, but you've got 4 T30 Torx screws. We're going to take these off and take the oil pump apart. I've already found some metal bits which were jamming in the wheels of the oil pump. So this pump is faulty. We're gonna have to replace it with a new one. I wanted to take you through all the gaskets that are going to be needed for this rebuild. This is the F9Q 760 engine for the Renault Trafic, Vauxhall Vivaro and Nissan Primastar. So this is probably as simple as it gets. These engines are 4-cylinder with 8 valves, 1 camshaft, so very simple engine. As you can see, we've got quite a lot of products here from Elring. So this is over here for this panel on the timing end of the crankshaft, and just in case if you're wondering, it doesn't come in this full engine kit. They call it the full engine kit, and I will try and share the part numbers. So this is the part number 867500. So they call it a full engine kit, but it's not a full engine gasket kit. You're gonna need to buy this one separately, which is 331831. This is the vacuum pump gasket, and then we've got cylinder head bolts. These are again made by Elring, 272010. Full gasket kit with studs and nuts for turbocharger and exhaust, and this is the head gasket here. So quite a lot of gaskets and seals. So this is just an idea of what you're gonna need in order to rebuild an F9Q engine. I'm gonna put all these parts in the description as usual. These are not referral links. I'm not making any money on these. I'm just gonna save you some time to search around. In the next steps, I'm going to show you how to check the gap of the piston rings. We're going to start first with the old piston rings. We're going to check the gaps, and also we're going to reference them against the new ones. The new piston rings are made by Kolbenschmidt, which is part of Rheinmetall. This is probably one of the biggest German manufacturers, and they're actually manufacturing the original parts in this engine. For example, I want to show you the piston here. I believe the logo is on the inside, so you've got the Renault logo, and you also KS for Kolbenschmidt. So you're probably not going to see it very well here, but just in case if you have any doubt, the original parts in this engine are made by Kolbenschmidt, which is why I'm going with that brand. The new piston rings, they're made, as I said, by KS or Kolbenschmidt. They come in this pouch, so you've got the top compression piston ring, you've got the middle one and the bottom scraper piston ring with the metal coil. So we're gonna insert this one first, then after that, and then the third one at the end. The third one is not really, we don't have to worry about it so much, but we're gonna check it as part of this study. And these are the old piston rings. I've already done some pre-checks, and there's quite a difference, quite a bigger gap between the old ones and the new ones. This can only make it better, and also as long as we stick within the tolerance here, which is shown. So this is the factory manual. I've got a micrometer here, which I'm going to be using to take some measurements, just to make sure that the thickness of the piston rings is exactly the same. So you want to make sure that you're checking the exact engine you're working on. So in my case it's F9Q 760. You see there's many different variants of this F9Q. So the compression ring, it should be between 0.15 and 0.30. The second sealing ring should be between 0.7 and 0.9, and the third one, scraper, should be 0.25 to 0.50. Now they're all important, but the reason I said you don't have to worry so much about the third one, the scraper oil ring, is because it doesn't get as hot like the top two, especially like the top compression ring. So it doesn't expand as much, but obviously we're going to make sure everything is within the tolerances. Now I'm going to put the camera on the stand. We're going to check the thickness of these old piston rings versus the new ones, and then we're going to place them in the cylinders, push them halfway with this piston, and then take some measurements with a filler gauge. And I've got two different sets. Of course, I've calibrated these and I've checked them with a micrometer, and the values are exactly 100%. These are the new piston rings, these are the old ones. So we're going to start by checking the thickness of the old one. So we're getting on this part of the piston ring about 2.48. So let's call it 2.48. We're going to take another measurement here, 2.484, and the final measurement somewhere around here, 2.477. Okay, that's the worn piston ring. The manual says this should be 2.5, and we're much closer to the standard value with this new piston ring. 2.484. .49. Let me do another one just in case. .486. So not so much more wear. The next one is going to be about 2. 1.98. Same. 1.9. This is exactly the same everywhere. 1.98 was the figure on the old one. That's more like it. Okay, and another 1.99, and just one more measurement, 2.995, 99, 2.99 again, and the last piston ring, 2.98, 3, 2.985, 986, 2.98. Perfect. We're going to check the gap of the old piston rings first, and then we're going to do the new ones. So we're going to start with the top compression piston ring, and this is how I like to install them. So just insert it sideways and then push it down. I'm gonna spray just a little bit of WD-40 for the purpose of this measuring exercise, and then just push it down. I like to go to about here, halfway. Okay, that's perfect. Let's get our filler gauge, and I'm just automatically gonna go to the thickest one of all, which is 1.0. This is 1 millimeter. Doesn't fit. We'll go down to the next one, which is on the other side, and the next one is going to be 0.9, and 0.9 fits. You can see this is 0.90. So now we're going to proceed with the new one. Filler gauge. I can tell you just by looking at it that the gap is much smaller, and we're just gonna go, maybe we're gonna try 0.4 first, just for the sake of this exercise. And I can tell you 0.4 doesn't fit. We've got 0.35, and yes, we've got 0.35 gap on the new piston ring. So the standard values are 0.15 to 0.30, and in this case it's 0.35. And as I said, this engine runs perfectly fine on a cold start, hot start, plenty of power, even with the 0.9 gap. So obviously we have been losing a little bit of compression, but it wasn't enough to cause any performance issue that you could actually feel when you're driving the vehicle. So this should make things only better. And at 0.35 we're literally just 0.05 off the standard the higher end of the spec. And of course you're going to have some wear on the cylinder as well. It's very minimal, but there's obviously still some wear. We're basically going to be nearly 3 times better off than where we are previously. So just be very gentle when you're placing these in and out. Second piston ring. The gap here is even bigger from what I can tell. I haven't done any measurements on the second piston ring yet, but I can tell that the gap here is probably over 1. So if it's over 1, we're not even going to bother, because my filler gauges go up to 1.0. Yeah, that's probably 1.2, 1.3, something like that. Zero 0.9, nope. 0.8, nope. I assume the next one is going to be the correct one. 0.7, yes, somewhere around 0.75. What does the standard spec say? 0.7 to 0.9. So we're bang on. This is F9Q 760. The first one is 0.15 to 0.30, 0.7 to 0.9, which we are right in the middle, and then the third one is going to be 0.25 to 0.50. So let's see if that matches. So you want to do obviously all these measurements before you install the piston rings on the pistons. This one is pretty loose, as you can tell, bigger gap. This is obviously the used one. Slides down very easy. 0.7, very tight fit. So you're talking somewhere like 0.69 or 68. So this was the used one. I'm just gonna go to 0.60 and see what happens from there. Nope. 0.50. Nope. 0.4. No. 0.35 on the third one. So let's go ahead and install the piston rings. Okay, let's proceed with the installation of the piston rings. The piston rings come in this nice box. This is the part number. Hopefully you can see this clearly on your screen. I'm going to try and focus on it. I'm going to put all these part numbers in the description. I'm going to start with the bottom one. This is the coil that you want to basically just loosen up. And what I like to do is, I don't like to take it out completely. Okay, close it in. Make sure this is nice and tight so there's no gap. Just push it in gently and this will close properly. And as you can see, Kolbenschmidt have painted these with white paint, so I normally like to put them here on this piston mark. And what you want to end up with is the gap of this bottom scraper piston ring. You want to end up with this basically on the paint. Now you can do it by hand. You can stretch it by hand, which you can do that. What I like to do is you can also use this set of piston ring pliers. These are probably the cheapest pliers you can get, but I actually quite like them. And you can place the piston ring inside it. You can see it's beveled at a 45-degree angle possibly, or maybe a bit less, maybe 35-40 degrees. And you want to make sure that this is this has the right orientation. So all the letters on the Kolbenschmidt piston rings are on the top, which faces the top. And as you can see, these are the letters. It says KS for Kolbenschmidt and then 20 point. And place the piston ring over the coil. So if it's misaligned, move out the piston ring, place the white paint at the mark. This is the mark that I'm talking about. Hopefully you can see this clearly on the camera. So we've got the paint mark here in the middle. Now let's place our piston ring on the top. So it's a little bit fiddly, but you'll get there. So this is where you want to be. The paint mark is right there at the gap, and I like to leave it here. Now we're going to install the second one, which is the thinner one. And you want to make sure that this says stop, and you're going to position it this way. So pliers, position it nicely in the grooves, and don't worry about the 120 degrees position just yet. Okay, that's the second piston ring in place. Now on the third one, I'm going to use this tool. It is a little bit easier to install it with this one. And that's the third one in place. So what I like to do is I like to leave this one at the back, rotate the piston the other way, have the top piston ring gap on this side, and then the second one on this side here. Compress it with the compression tool, and then we're going to insert it inside the block. So that's how you install piston rings on the piston. This is a diesel engine F9Q 760. You can apply it on any diesel engine as long as it has this design of piston rings. I want to give you a top tip before you install a cylinder head on a block, and you want to clean up the threads before you install your new head gasket bolts. And believe me, you may think, oh well, it's all sealed, well lubricated. You will be surprised how much rust you're going to remove, and it's very important before you tighten the bolts that you do this, otherwise you're going to apply the wrong torque. You can already hear the scraping noise, a little bit of rust in the holes. So you can go back and forth if you feel any tension. And this is where I'm going to stop. So what I'll do is, because I've got my block on an engine stand, I don't want any dirt falling in, even though the engine block is completely disassembled. But what I'll do is I'll flip it upside down, and I'm going to clean it up first with brake cleaner. I will spray brake cleaner in the holes, and then after that I'm going to finish it with compressed air. So this is nice and clean. I've already cleaned this one off camera, but I'm just gonna go again just in case. And this one is obviously a lot smoother. So I'll just continue with the rest of the holes. You've got 10 altogether, and then we'll be back with the installation process. Now I'm going to rinse the cylinders upside down, just in case there's any dirt or any metal shavings. I'm going to show you the easiest way to remove valves and valve springs from a cylinder head, which is obviously removed from the engine. I've got one of these clamps. You can get these pretty cheaply on the internet, and what I'm planning to do is I want to clamp the underneath on the valve. So you want to place it on the valve itself. Okay. These are the 2 half moons. Now we're going to release the clamp. We're going to take the spring out and drop the valve. Make sure you don't drop your valve down when you're releasing. You've got this part on the top of the spring. I'm just going to keep the springs just the way they are. And then you've got the valve here. And then underneath you've got the valve stem seal. So that's your intake valve. Valve number 1. I've numbered them because I'm gonna place them in the exact same places. So that's how easy it is to remove valves and springs on a 1.9 DCI diesel engine. Let's start with the checking of the crankshaft bearings, the main crankshaft bearings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the engine upside down. Let's lock it in place. I'm gonna install the clean old bearings in place. Then we're gonna put the crankshaft in here. Then we're gonna put the crankshaft caps. And then we're gonna torque it to spec. Obviously we're gonna put the plastic gauge on top of the crankshaft, and then that will basically, when we tighten them to spec, that will compress the plastic gauge, and then we're gonna be able to read the clearances. So let's do this. You have to do this dry. You don't want to apply any oil. I'm gonna show you what plastic gauge I use. I have two different types. This one here is the smaller tolerance, and this one here is for the bigger tolerances. I don't really expect to have to use this one, but I have it just in case. So let's apply these in the middle. We're gonna install and tighten everything with oil-free bearings, and then after this we're gonna do the same with the new bearings and see the gaps. This is bearing cap number 1, so you want to install this in the same way as 2, 3, 4 and 5, and then put the bolts in place. I want to show you the pattern in which we're gonna torque the cap bolts, and then the Newton meters, and this is the torque spec for these crankshaft main bearing caps for the bolts. We're going to apply 20 Newton meters first, and then we're going to apply 62 degrees. You have plus minus 4 degrees, so we're going to aim for about 62 degrees on the second stage of torque. The correct socket for this bolt is E14. I'm gonna zero my angle tool, and then we're gonna apply 60 degrees. That's all the bolts done. Now we're gonna have to undo them, remove the caps, and measure the gap between the bearings and the caps and see the tolerances. Okay guys, so let's take some readings now. We're gonna start with number 1 here, exactly 0.05. How I know this is perfect, I've got the Renault manuals, and I'm gonna leave a link in the description with the link for the website where I purchased my manuals from. And the spec for these bearings is from 0.04 to 0.075, so we're right in the middle at 0.5. Let's continue on with the other ones. This one is 0.50 as well. These are all very much the same. A little bit more wear on this one here, so this one is slightly bigger, 0.052 maybe, or 51. So this one is 0.60 here on this one, on cylinder number 5. This is on the timing end here. Let's install the new bearings and repeat the process again. We're gonna have to clean the plastic gauge from the crankshaft in order to repeat the process. Make sure it doesn't fall into the oil journals inside the crank here, so just clean it up. If you're seeing some tiny scoring marks and imperfection on the crankshaft, I actually went to my local crankshaft machine shop. There is a specialist here near me, and he has over 40 years of experience in the business. And he said normally he polishes them, and the polishing is about £50 sterling. This is now in 2024. But he said, I don't want to take your money, and there's absolutely no need to polish this crankshaft. I've seen so much worse, and there's absolutely no need. So the more material you remove from the crankshaft, the worse, because you're actually removing the hardened part of the material. So it's best if your crankshaft looks like this, just leave it alone and put new bearings. I've done one earlier. Let's proceed with the next one. All bearings are installed in the caps now. Let's install the crankshaft. put some plastic gauge, do these again and check the clearance. I've placed the new bearings underneath. The crankshaft is nice and clean, so in the oil we're doing another dry test to see what the gap is, what the difference is between the new and the old bearings. So you can see I've placed a plastic gauge on each of the bearings, and I'm gonna start with the middle one here, number 3. Torque procedure complete. Now we're going to loosen everything again, remove the caps and check the clearance between these caps and the bearings and the crankshaft. Okay, so we've done this once before with the old bearings. Now let's check the clearances with the new bearings in place, and I can tell you if we are almost the same tolerances as before. Slightly obviously less because the new bearings, but we're going to be within spec, I can tell by looking at them. Let me get my strip, and I hope you can see this clearly. You mightn't have the best view. We're about 0.060 and the limit was 0.4 to 0.75, so we're well within. All these look pretty much the same. That's about 0.60, that's about 0.60, same as that one, and the last one, which is number 1, 0.60. So we said 0.045 is the lower end and 0.075 is the higher end, and we are at 0.60, so great news. Now I'm not going to bore you to death again, so I'm simply going to repeat the process. I'm going to take the crankshaft out, I'm going to clean the plastic gauge from it and from the caps, and then basically what I'm going to do is, I'm happy with the clearances, I'm going to lubricate the bearings and the crankshaft itself, and then we're going to install it in place and then tighten it to spec, and that will be it. It will be closed and it will not be open again. Then we're going to be checking the conrod tolerances, but we can do this with the crankshaft fully in place. I'm gonna use some silicone. I like to use these cans for this purpose because I can just literally push that in and squirt it in, and then we're gonna have to see some silicone coming out through these holes to seal nicely. In the repair manual it says that you're gonna use up about 45 milliliters of silicone, and this container is brand new and it has 200 milliliters, so that should be more than plenty. Very good. It came out on both sides from top to bottom, which is a great sign. We're going to proceed with the installation of the conrod bearings on the conrods and the caps as well. The part number for this product is 777-52600. This is a standard size. If you're grinding, you're probably going to go plus 0.25 or larger. And these are good quality steel backed proper Kolbenschmidt bearings. We're going to install the bearings on the caps and the rods as well. So you've got two types of bearings in the kit, and one is just like dull polished aluminium. This is the bottom and this is the top, which is more like kind of plasticky gray color, and it says upper on it, so upper means this is the upper side. So you just want to take this out of the way. I'm going to get a clean rag, clean up the surface. You can just see how bad these bearings are. They're scored and pitted almost like you've sandblasted them. I like to install them the way I take them off. The rating on the old ones was here at the front, so that's how I'm going to install them. Don't put any oil on the surface. Push them down. You can see it says lower on the lower bearings. Let's install these on the crankshaft now and take some measurements with plastic gauge. Just before I install the pistons in the block, I like to wrap these sharp parts here with tape so they don't score the cylinders. I've already installed one of the pistons off camera. You want one of these tools. I like to position my bottom oil ring here, just right in the middle, and then the other two, I like to put them here and here, somewhere there. So hopefully this makes sense. Now we'll slip this tool on. So as you can see, we've tightened this as much as we can. You can see just a little bit of a gap here, but you can squeeze it with your thumb or fingers just when you're installing it. And now very important, this here, there's a little arrow, it always points towards the flywheel or cylinder number 1. I'm gonna lubricate the piston here thoroughly, and I'm also gonna put some oil on the cylinder itself. So you want to insert, and you can see why I put the tape, because I don't want to score the cylinder. Place this down and then give it a gentle tap. The skirts will keep you right, and then, as I said, you can use your fingers to compress even further. We've done 25 Newton meters. Now let's proceed with the next final torque spec procedure, which is going to be 110 degrees. We've got 11 millimeter socket. So ladies and gentlemen, this is all 4 conrod caps tightened to the correct spec. So 25 Newton meters plus 110 degrees. Everything should turn nice and smooth. I'm going to install the oil pump. You want to install the chain on the pump first, and then place it over the crankshaft sprocket. Then you could proceed with aligning the hole here for the 2 bolts. I'm not going to tighten the bolts yet. What I will do is I'm going to leave this slightly loose so I can place the baffle plate here. Okay, let's go and tighten up the oil pump bolts. They take 25 Newton meters. Each one of these bolts is 25, and then the splash plate, that's 25 as well. We're going to install the crankshaft nose panel here. This is the original Elring gasket. You can see the part number 906530. I'm going to replace the crankshaft seal on it as well. So this is the panel. We're going to remove this crankshaft seal and install a new one, and after this we're going to install everything in place. I'm going to install the new seal. This is the old one. You just flip this upside down and you just punch it. I used a large screwdriver and a copper hammer. So you want to turn this now this way. Normally the user manual says not to oil these seals. Just push it by hand a little bit to try and get it seated. And what you'll find, you can probably install it by hand, but if you can't, make sure to make use of a socket. This is a 38mm socket, but I believe I can push this one nearly the whole way in just with my fingers. Now let me just give it a light tap. Okay, this is ready to go. I'm going to put a bit of oil on the seal just before I install it, and some oil on the shaft as well. The torque for these bolts is 14 Newton meters. Make sure this panel is perfectly flush. Let's go and install the gasket on the sump. There's a little notch here which matches with the sump, and then once you install this, it's much easier to get these all aligned. In a previous video I showed you how I applied a little bit of silicone on the inside. On this occasion I'm not gonna do it, and let's see if we get any leaks. The last time I thought I had a slightly warped sump, and turns out the leak was actually from above the sump, from the turbocharger feed pipe. So hopefully this will do the job and will seal the sump properly without any additional silicone. So this is ready to go. Just before we install the sump, you want to apply some silicone here on this gap and this gap here. This is on the timing side of the engine, and then the same on this is going to be bearing 1. So don't go crazy, just a thin bead. Perfect. $22 bolts. This is the sequence we're going to be working from, so you want to tighten number 8 and 15 first. So number 8 is here. 4 and 19 is next. 11 and 12. 10 and 13, 9 and 14, 8 and 15, 7 and 16, 6 and 17, 5 and 18, 3 and 20, 2 and 21, 22. And that's how we tighten a sump on a F9Q 760 engine. I've replaced the gasket on the oil cooler. Just before we continue with the installation of the new cylinder head and the cylinder head gasket, I wanted to update you on exactly what happened with the removal of the injectors. As you know, I tried many different ways to remove the injectors. First, the normal way by just trying to take them out with a sliding hammer. Then I had to modify and make a different heavy-duty sliding hammer. After this, I tried to apply extreme amount of heat. I then got a pneumatic tool from a friend of mine. He's never had any issues with this tool before, but this tool was not strong enough to remove my injectors. Then I tried to cut them. Then I used a welder to heat them up. I welded bolts on top of the cut injectors so I can spin them with an impact gun. That didn't work, so eventually I had to bring it to a machine shop. I wasted 2 weeks and 180 pounds on machine shop fees, so the machine shop can drill them out. That didn't work as well. Eventually I got fed up and I bought another cylinder head, which is what I should have done from the start. It cost me only 80 pounds. It's from a Renault Laguna, which has a slightly different position of the engine at the engine bay and no water leaks in these injectors. When I got the cylinder head, they came out literally, I pulled them with 2 fingers. And of course, as I'm doing full restoration, I had to fully clean up, take apart, restore the cylinder head. And this is what you're seeing now as a finished product. I sprayed it with heat-resistant paint, so this should protect it for a very long time. So now let's proceed with the installation of the cylinder head. I'm going to show you how to remove this camshaft seal from the head here. So what I've done is I've welded a screw on a nut. I'm going to thread it in, and then I've got one of these sliding hammers, and that's the job done. Now let's install the camshaft sprocket. So the first thing I like to do is to make sure that the crankshaft and the pistons are in the right position. So this is obviously very easy to see when you have the cylinder head removed, because you can see cylinder 1 and 4 are at top dead center. And then you've got the crankshaft sprocket, which is keyed, so you can only go one way. So once you install that, this mark lines up with the exact perfect timing mark for the crankshaft. So that's one thing to consider. Now, whenever we install the cylinder head, we don't want to have any valves interfering with these pistons at top dead center. So when we install the head, we want the valves on cylinder 2 and 3 to be open, not these ones here at 1 and 4. You basically have to install this camshaft sprocket It's keyed as well, as you've seen in the removal video. So you can only install it one way. Let's say you end up with the timing notch right here or somewhere on the bottom. You want to rotate it and have it facing up. So when you do that, you're going to end up with the valves, cylinders 2 and 3 open. You want to install your new head gasket, which is made by Elring. This one here is 157351. This is the part number. It comes with instructions, and this shows you the location. So this is top, so you don't want to flip these upside down by mistake. Before we proceed with the installation of the cylinder head, we're going to give this surface a good wipe with brake cleaner. I'm going to show you how to correctly test the flatness of the cylinder head. This is F9Q engine. This is a Renault engine, 1.9dci. Of course, you can apply this technique to all the engines, but obviously we've got the spec for this F9Q head. So the spec for this flatness test is 0.05. You want to have a perfectly straight edge, this is what it is. So you want to place it across the head, and then you want to use this 0.05 feeler gauge and try and insert it underneath. Now if it doesn't go through, happy days, great news, you've got a flat head. If your head is warped, this is going to go in at some point somewhere. This is 0.02. I bet I'm probably going to find space here between the valves. Yeah, it will go under, but it will not go completely through. It will go a bit more here, but again, not completely through. This side here, it went completely through. So this is what you don't want to have with anything above 0.05. So hopefully this makes sense. You can insert up to 0.05, but you don't want to have any more than that. And I tried with my feeler gauges, so in some places I can fit 0.03, and in some places 0.04, but definitely not 0.05, not even the tip of it. So this is a good way to check the flatness of your head. Obviously you can move this across, you can do it on this side. If you don't have valves in place, you can do it diagonally, do it a few different ways, but you get the gist. So this is the idea, and this is how we identify a good, clean, straight head. So this is the sequence: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of the bolts, and this is the torque spec. So we're going to do it in 2 stages: 30 Newton meters first, and then 230 degrees. We're also going to use brand new bolts, and this is the part number. These are Elring 272010. That is a full set of head bolts. The first thing you want to do is to place the new cylinder head gasket on the top in the correct way. You can see it says top here. So place the gasket. I've chased up the threads here, so I've cleaned them up. I had the block upside down so no rust gets in. Blew it with compressed air, clean it with brake cleaner, and then chase them up right again second time. So this is it really. I don't want to touch this gasket too much because I don't want to contaminate it. Everything is nice and clean. Clean it up with brake cleaner, and now it's time for the cylinder head to go on the top. Okay, the cylinder head is in place. These are the new bolts, and what I like to do is just apply a little bit of oil under the head on each bolt. We're going to apply 30 Newton meters first, starting with this bolt here in the middle. number 9, and finally number 10. That's the first stage at 30 Newton meters each bolt. Now we're gonna get the angle tool and we're gonna apply 230 degrees. So ladies and gentlemen, this is how you tighten a cylinder head on a Renault Trafic, Vauxhall Vivaro, Nissan Primastar and many other Renault models. This is F9Q 760. Let's apply a bit of assembly lube on these cam lobes. I'm gonna install new gaskets on the valve cover bolts. The refurbished valve cover. The torque for these is 13 Newton meters, as there's a pre-torque setting of 2.5. I don't really have a sensitive enough unit to torque to 2.5 Newton meters, so we're gonna just torque it lightly. That's 13 Newton meters on each one of these bolts. I'm going to install the vacuum pump. So in order to install this in place, you're going to need a brand new gasket, and this is Elring 331831. So let's go ahead and install this. This one has only 2 bolts, the Laguna has 3 bolts, so we're gonna put the gasket on the body of the vacuum pump and then install it in place. And the second bolt on the bottom. These are T40 Torx. The torque spec for this switch is 38 Newton meters. So let's go ahead and install this in place. Let's install the crankcase ventilation valve. I've lubricated the O-ring. This hose goes in here. New stainless steel bolts. These bolts normally receive 10 Newton meters, but I'm just going to do it by hand on this occasion because it's nothing critical. I'm going to install the fuel rail now. It's time to install the water pump. Let me focus on the part number here. This is Febi Bilstein part, and the part number is 22144. And let me see what we have in the kit here. The usual quality from Febi. They supply you with the gasket, so you don't have to buy it separately, and the water pump. And I can see the water pump has been upgraded to one with metal impeller rather than plastic or ceramic. I'm going to apply 10 Newton meters of torque on all 5 bolts. Some people do it by hand. I'm going to use my torque wrench here just to be perfectly accurate. On cross pattern, of course. Perfect job. I'm going to go ahead and install the timing belt kit. So this is what I'm using. I'm using Febi Bilstein timing belt kit, and this is what was on the van for about 60,000 miles previously. I used the same timing belt kit with absolutely no issues, and if I show you the water pump, it's still in very good condition, so very high quality parts. The part number here is 22056. You get the belt and the tensioner, and this is the belt itself. So there's a mark on the belt which we're going to align with the camshaft here with top dead center, and we'll just leave it here for now. What I'm planning to do here is to use a bit of blue Loctite on these bolts. I'm going to apply 10 Newton meters of torque on these bolts. I'm going to show you how to correctly install timing belt on a 1.9dci F9Q engine. This is the famous, well-known Renault Trafic Vauxhall Vivaro, Nissan Primastar, Renault Laguna, Megane, and many other models. So this is the Febi belt that I'm going to be using, along with the Febi pump and the tensioner, which is right here. This is part of the tensioner. I've removed this so I can install the belt, and also this plate comes with the tensioner. So there's a couple of very important things that I want to make you aware of, and I'm hoping this is focusing very well here so you can see what I'm talking about. So you've got one timing mark, you've got the arrows that show you the direction of the rotation of the belt, and also you have another mark here down below. So hopefully you can see the two marks, one on my left hand and one on my right hand. So what you want to do is you want to align these, so one of these has to match this notch here that I've marked with white. You can see it on your crankshaft sprocket, you can see the notch here. I've just highlighted it with white paint so you can see it a bit easier. And then the second mark has to align with the marking on the crankshaft sprocket. So once you place this here, you can also use a cable tie if you want to do something like that, so it doesn't jump. Okay, so let's go ahead and install a cable tie in place, just so we can hold this belt so it doesn't jump. We want to hold this white line here against the notch. So I've clamped this, it's not going anywhere. If you move the belt, it's not going to jump. And if we try and install this belt, I can tell you probably right now we're probably going to struggle to install it on the bottom crankshaft sprocket here. So we're very close but not there yet. So what I will advise you to do, get your ratchet. This is 18mm bolt, and just rotate. When you feel resistance, when the camshaft is just about to turn, obviously don't go any further, but that obviously you don't have to worry about the diesel high pressure pump here. There's no timing on it, and that will allow you a bit more movement. So what you want to do is you want to create a bit more tension, and that will hopefully allow you to insert the belt on the correct tooth, which I'm going to show you in a minute. So this sprocket moved again slightly. Let's rotate it, feed it down, hold it with the ratchet if you have to, and then install it in place. So you've actually seen me doing it in real time. We've cable tied this one here, this one down below is in place. I'm going to show you the marking, and you want to have the belt on the inside. Very important now to put a bit of tension, just obviously the sprocket will go back again, it will align, and then you can install your washer and the nut just by hand, just gently. What I've done here, so I've got an M6 bolt. I'm going to show you the actual Renault procedure on the screen, and it uses some really fancy special tools which we don't have, and there's really no need for any special tools when it comes to working on this engine, apart from the locking pin which is inserted in the crankshaft here, the crankshaft locking pin. So this will hold the crankshaft in place, and this sprocket won't move. So this is an M6 bolt, and I can measure the length of this bolt just to show you as well. And I've got two small washers. So the usable length of this bolt is about 15mm. I'm gonna use Loctite 243. This is medium strength thread locker, and I'm going to apply the Loctite We've tightened the M6 bolt here. Now we're going to apply 45 Newton meters on this nut. After, of course, we rotate the belt a few times. So this is finger tight at the moment. I'm going to cut the cable tie, and you can see that this matches here. And I'm also going to bring you closer to show you the other mark. So this is as clear as I can show you. You can see how it matches So this is the white paint mark on the belt, and it matches the mark on the sprocket here. So let's go over it again. This one aligns. This is the correct route for the belt. Drives the water pump, the crankshaft sprocket, and then the tensioner, which we said we're gonna tighten after a few rotations just to make sure that there's no contact with the valves. I can tell you there'll be no issues with that, but just to be 100% sure, if you've never done this before, this is going to be a good guide for you. I've installed the bolt here in place. Now remove your locking pin. So this is one rotation on the crank, two, after you rotate several times, your marks are going to move from the notches, and that doesn't mean that your belt has slipped. It just means that obviously the sprockets have different number of teeth, and if you keep rotating for a long time, eventually you will line it up. I'm just going to look at my marking here, so I'm very close to top dead center on cylinder 1. I'm going to attempt to insert my tool just for a final check. I'm going to rotate, and then the pin locks. We're just in the right place here and down below. So again, don't worry if your paint marks have moved, that's totally normal. What you can do as well, which is what's shown in the user manual, is you can insert your cover. This is the original cover. Some people go for hard cover, and if you look through this window, we're actually going to see this mark. So this concludes the timing. Everything is perfect. I'm going to apply 45 Newton meters on this nut here, and before that I'm also going to apply a little bit of thread locker on it just to be 100% sure. I've got my torque wrench set up, and we've got a 16mm nut here, and that's 45 Newton meters. After this, you can install your cover, which sit right here, and then you can remove your bolt and install the crank pulley. The correct torque procedure for this bolt is 20 Newton meters initial torque, and after this 115 degrees. You have plus minus 15 degrees, so I'm gonna aim for about 120 degrees, somewhere there. let's install the crankshaft locking pin plug. I like to use some Rheinmetall. So this stays in liquid form forever, doesn't harden, and it doesn't allow oil to go to the threads. Now the torque for this bolt is 25 Newton meters, so let's set the torque wrench to 25. Let's go ahead and install the glow plugs. You want to be very careful with these as they can cross thread very easily. So avoid using any power tools. I'm going to do this by hand with a hand tool. This is a 10mm socket. I'm going to clean up the threads first, and then I'm going to take it out. I'm going to put some high temperature ceramic grease on it. I've shown you this product before in my previous videos. This is a great product by Febi, part number 26712, and this is good for up to 1400 degrees Celsius. So I'm going to use just a little bit on each one of these glow plugs. I'm going to install the copper washers. Normally I put these on the injectors, but these are slightly loose, and I'm just going to insert them in this manner. I'm going to be installing two brand new Bosch injectors on cylinder 1 and 4. These are the ones that broke during the removal, and this is genuine Bosch with sticker on it. They also very conveniently provide you with the copper washer, but I have the Elring copper washers anyway. This is the injector itself. This is the clamp and the bolt. These bolts are reusable and they're torqued at 25 Newton meters. I'm just going to tighten this by hand. I'm going to install all the injectors, and then we're going to apply the correct torque, as I mentioned, 25 Newton meters for each injector. I'm gonna torque the bolts to 25 Newton meters. I'm going to install the intake manifold gasket. This is obviously intake and exhaust manifold gasket. It does both. And this is from the Elring full engine kit. Install all the washers. I'm gonna replace this damaged bushing. This normally sits on the shaft and on top of this and holds the transmission on the right hand side if you're looking at the engine. This is what the new one looks like, and it's made by Febi. It is 40083. So this is what I'm gonna be using. Install the small gasket on the pipe. I'm using, this is a power steering pulley from a VW or Audi, and I'm using this pulley with the old seal inserted in the rim, and then I just beat it in place, and then after that I finished it with a piece of timber. And this is perfectly flush. So this is how you install rear crankshaft main seal. The correct torque spec for these bolts is 60 Newton meters. I've locked the flywheel here with a sprocket from a different engine, and this will hold the crankshaft now. I'm going to install the clutch now. I've already installed the release bearing on the gearbox. Got some paperwork here. This is a blueprint clutch that I'm going to be using. I'm going to put the part number in the description as usual. This is ADN 130240. Let me try and zoom in on the part number. Clutch. And the pressure plate. Don't forget to rinse the pressure plate because it's probably oily. So use some brake cleaner. You want to fit your clutch the correct way. As you can see, it says gearbox side here, so you can't really get this wrong, to be honest. The correct torque for the bolts on the pressure plate is 20 Newton meters. So let's go ahead and tighten these in crisscross pattern. I'm going to install the starter motor, and this is the original starter motor, although there's nothing wrong with it so far and it's operational. It doesn't mean it's not going to give up on me probably in another year or two. And since I've rebuilt the engine and the gearbox completely, don't really want to have to go back and do this. It's at the back of the engine, it's just a little bit awkward, so I decided to change it with a new one. The new one is made by Fabi Bilstein. The part number is 101584. This is a 2.1 kilowatt starter motor. And let's take it out of its packaging. And when you compare it to the original Vallejo or Renault, start motor is practically identical, although a lot cleaner than that. And it's no big deal. It's fairly simple to install when you have access like that with the engine and the gearbox removed out of the vehicle. You want to remove this bolt from here, from the old starter. I'm going to clean it up with brake cleaner and install it right here. I'm going to install a brand new turbo oil feed hose. You've got two O-rings. I'm going to lubricate them with a little bit of WD-40 just because I don't want to tear them during the installation. Very important step before you install the oil pipe. Fill up the turbo with oil. I'm going to attach the starter motor cables at the back and the earth cables, and then we're going to proceed with the rest of the wiring. I'm going to replace this old and perished bushing with a new one. It's made by Febi. There are the 3 bolts that hold in place. I'm going to show you the part number. The part number for this bush is 31417. This is the engine mount. This one is badly cracked. We're going to replace it with a new one, and the new one is made by Febi, and the part number is 173213. Absolutely identical. It's time to add some fluids to this freshly refurbished engine. I'm going to start with the oil and the oil filter. So this is the oil filter, and the part number for the oil filter is 32398. The oil is 5W40. Please avoid using 5W30 on this engine. It's recommended that you use 5W or 0W40. The part number is 32938, and it should take about 4.8 liters. So I pre-fill the oil filter maybe halfway full, because obviously I don't want to make a mess and spill it on the freshly refurbished engine. And then we're going to add the rest of the oil in the basically oil filler tube here. I'm going to get a funnel because I find the original funnel that they supply by Renault is not very good and it leaks all over the place. So you want to remove your dipstick. It's a very slow process on these engines, but what can you do? That's the way they've designed it. So we're probably going to take 5 liters of oil because this is completely dry fill and there's not a drop of oil in the engine. So I would say we could safely take the 5 liters without any issues. I'm going to replace this gearbox bushing, and the new one is going to be a Febi one. As usual, I like these parts. This is the new one, this is the old one. The part number for the correct part is 31420. So this is what I've chosen to use, and now I'm going to go underneath the vehicle and install it in place. The smaller bolt is for the smaller bush, and then the bigger is for the bigger bush. It's time for a first start, so wish me good luck. Hopefully everything goes to plan. We're going to build up a bit of oil pressure first, and then we're going to hopefully start the engine. first start, it's promising. There is compression, we've got oil. I'm obviously afraid to run it for too long, but we're going to leave it a few minutes because I don't want to overload the starter and I don't want to burn it out. So so far good news. We've got obviously air and fuel and compression. We've got the three main ingredients for the recipe of disaster. So let's see what happens next. As I said, I'm going to leave it for a few minutes to just rest. We've built up plenty of oil pressure. I didn't even have to disconnect the pressure regulator on the high pressure pump here. So we've got, obviously, we bled most of the air out of the fuel system. It was completely drained. Plus we've got two new injectors in number 1 and 4. So far, positive signs of health in this engine. We'll have to, as I said, give it a few more tries and then see what happens.